Hello everybody, my name is Mike Geig and welcome to another live training session with Unity. Before we begin, I don't care what Untold ENT says in chat, he is not my mom. For anyone who's watching this in the archive and not participating live, you're going to have no idea what I'm talking about. It's good to see so many people turned out today. We have right now 1,100 people watching live, so that's quite fantastic. So we have a lot to cover today, so I want to get to it pretty quick. Before we start, as always, I just want to say, if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, concerns, suggestions, feel free to follow us on Twitter and talk to us on Twitter at Unity3D, at Mike Geig, which is me, at Will Goldstone, and at the Ant Ranch. So, like I said, we're going to go kind of fast today because we have a lot of content to cover. We will be, for any of you who don't know, we will be making a game today. We're going to be making a two-dimensional, a 2D, infinite runner / platformer, okay? And I kind of have some tips before we begin so that you can kind of get the most out of this. The first, I'm going to be trying to do this completely within an hour, so, it can take some time. But I'm going to be going kind of fast because we all have time frames here. With that in mind, don't attempt to follow along. You're just going to get frustrated. It's probably better to just watch and then try to follow along later when this is posted, recorded. It's going to be much simpler for you then. And then finally, what we're building, it is what is basically called a prototype. So this game is not going to like blow minds, but it's going to give you an idea of how you could take this and add to it to make your own kind of game. So don't think, your world's going to be rocked or anything with ingenuity or whatever. I'm going to show you how to make a basic infinite runner / platformer. Global Game Jam is this weekend, which is actually why I'm doing this session. I decided I wanted to do one more session before Global Game Jam to kind of get everyone in the game-making spirit and to get everyone interested in participating. Now, currently, there are now over 1,100 people in the room. So, basically, I'm not going to be able to monitor chat very well because there are a lot of people in here. And if you've ever been in here when there's this many people in there, chat is crazy. And since I'm doing the promotion and trying to keep up with chat, I will be doing my best. You will be able to watch this later in under the live training section, the live training archive section on our website. Just go to unity3d.com/learn and click either the live training section and click the archive tab, or go to the tutorial section and click the live training archive link, whichever. Okay, so again, please try to keep chat calm a little bit. That'll make things certainly easier for me anyway. So what I have here is I have Unity, a blank project. I've created a 2D project here. I am using Unity 4.3.3, I think, which is the newest one. So obviously I'm in a 2D scene and a 2D project. So in order to make things move quickly, we're going to be using sample assets, our new sample assets actually, for this project. So I'm going to access those by going to the asset store, and I'm going to type sample assets. I don't know if you haven't seen these yet. Here's a great opportunity to check these out. They're awesome. All right, they're in beta, so there are some bugs and glitches, but we're constantly getting feedback and stuff like that and making them better. So I'm just going to go ahead and import these sample assets, which can take a second here because it's got to decompress a lot of stuff. And I could pick and choose just the stuff that I wanted. Actually, everything that I want is in this 2D folder, but I'm just going to bring it all in. I'd hate to only bring in one part and then find out I needed another part and have to do this all again, so just keeping it simple. I am excited for Global Game Jam while we're doing this. I hope everyone else is too. I made an image today to kind of get everyone excited about making games. So I decided, hey, let's make some 2D games, and that's what we're going to do today. So I figured I'd throw this image up while we're waiting for everything to import, because it can take a little while. For anyone who's asking why my asset store loads so quickly, it's because I opened it previously. And once you've opened it once for a session, it opens again very quickly. So, yeah. Again, we're still importing, so this is still up. So, basically what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be using the 2D controller that I showed you how to make in our previous live session. For everyone who asked me to share the sprites for the 2D controller, and I said I couldn't or that I wouldn't, it's because they're actually in these sample assets, and since these sample assets hadn't been released yet, I could not provide them to you. So if you wanted those sprites that I showed you how to make the 2D controller with, they're now available. They're in the sample assets, and now you can have them. So that makes things real simple. And by the way, for everyone who doesn't know, this is Quentin and Charles. They've appeared in a few of our tutorial videos. So a lot of people were asking me who the heck these two people are. That's Quentin and Charles in Mario and Luigi get-ups. So yeah, I guess they're kind of our unofficial Learn Team mascots. And it was funnier in my head because I thought people would know who they were. And then ended up no one knew who they were. So, man, all right, these imports are taking a while to load. I should have really just selected just the 2D stuff because there's a lot of stuff in here. So I guess I'll read the chat. Fantastic paint job, thank you very much. Comparable to the Mona Lisa, thank you very much. Let's see here. So Lazy Sloth says, what's the link to the samples? Just go to the asset store and type in sample assets and they're right there. The link will open it in your browser, which you can't open with. Anyway, you have to open them with Unity. Let's see. Where's the asset store? You get to the asset store by going to the window folder or the window link at the top and clicking asset store. Okay, we're back. All right, so once that's done, you get this folder sample assets here, which actually has a whole bunch of stuff, right? 3D stuff, planes, cars, all sorts of stuff. What we're going to be really concerning ourselves with is this 2D folder right here. And by the way, for everyone who's curious, the game we're making today is a one-button control scheme. It's just the space bar, which means it'll port great to tablet or phone if that's the type of game you want to make. So that's why I built it this way, so that, you know, if during Global Game Jam you want to make a game for a mobile device, right, the input for this game is actually really, really simple. So that makes it pretty simple. All right, so we've got our scene here. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to, well, first off, save our scene. So I'm going to create a new folder, which I'm going to call Scenes. It'll help if I spell it correctly. You guys are going to be hearing a lot of my mechanical keyboard today, so get used to that. And I'll save my scene in my new Scenes folder, and we'll just call it Main Scene. There we go. It's always good to start by saving your work. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start building my sample assets, all right, or my prefabs. So I'll create another folder called Prefabs. And we need a prefab for a small piece of ground, a medium piece of ground, and a large piece of ground. We're basically going to programmatically generate our game, so it'll be different every playthrough. And so we're going to build some prefabs of the ground that we can just generate over and over and over and over again. All right, so what I'm going to do is I am going to come into my sample assets, the 2D folder, and I'm going to look for sprites. And my ground is all going to be made of this sprite right here. I'm just going to click and drag it into my scene, and it'll build a sprite object with a render and all that stuff for me. And so this is going to be my basic block. And my small ground is going to be one of these. My medium ground is going to be two of these. And my large ground is going to be three of these. So we're going to give it some components that we need. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Component, Physics 2D, Box Collider, because we want this to have a box collider. And then I also want to change the physics material on this. I want to make it a slippery ground. And the reason we're going to make it slippery ground is so that if our player jumps and hits the side of the blocks, we want them to slide down off of it instead of getting stuck, because getting stuck wouldn't be great. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in the physics material right here inside the 2D folder. So I clicked on sprites previously, just physics material right here. And I'm going to click and drag slippery. It's something that's part of the sample assets. And I'm going to drop it right there in my box collider for the physics material. And slippery is really just zero friction, zero bounciness. I mean, so you can make this yourself. You don't really need the sample. It just happens to be there. So this is our building block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to put the first one at 0, 0, 0. And then I will duplicate that. I got to select it. Duplicate that and put it at 2.55, 0, 0, 0. And then I will duplicate that and put it at 5.1, 0, 0, 0. So this will be our large prefab. And so I'll come to prefabs, my prefab folder, the one I created, and I'll right click and go create prefab, and I'll say large ground. And then in my scene, I'll create a game object. I'll create empty. And I will just grab the 3 pieces of my prefab. Oops. This one, and this one. And drag it under game object. And then drag game object over to large ground. So now my large ground prefab is exactly what I need. It's those 3 blocks. And I want to expand this, and I just want to ensure that the first one is 0, 0, 0, and then 2.500, and then finally 5.100. So our large ground prefab is basically that simple. Someone said, why not whole numbers? Because of the size of the sprites. I want them to all be in a line, and so there'd be gaps if I did whole numbers. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab these 4 and bring them out here. That's going to lose the prefab connection, which is fine with me. And then I will delete this one on the end. Goodbye. And I'll grab these 2, and I'll drag them back to that game object. I'll create a new prefab for medium ground. And I'll drag that game object over there. Boom. Again, I want to ensure that it's 0, 0, 0 and 2.5500. Fantastic. And again, I will drag these out, which will break my prefab, which is fine with me. I delete this one, and I will create a prefab, which will be small ground. And I will just click and drag this one on here, and there we go. So we have our small, our medium, and our large grounds, and now I can delete all of these objects and get them out of my scene. All right, so now what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to be able to instantiate random ground pieces and different spots, and that's what's going to build my level. And again, this is basically how we're going to programmatically generate all of our stuff. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with just a piece of ground because we need the player to be able to start somewhere on a piece of ground. So I'm just going to click and drag a large ground prefab, and I'm going to place it at -4, -3.5. Oops, not 0.35, -3.5, and 0. And if you're wondering how I came about those numbers, I've just built this game before, so I just moved it around until I found something I liked. If I go into the game view, I can see it sitting right there. That works well. So got some ground right there. Actually, I might move it over a little bit, but whatever. It's good for now. What aspect ratio am I in? 16:10 aspect ratio is pretty decent for tablets. So I'll leave it at 16:10 aspect ratio. All right, so now that I've got that, let's go ahead and start creating our player. So I'm going to go back into Sample Assets, 2D, and I am going to look for, and I don't remember what it is now. There it is, under Prefabs. So Sample Assets, 2D Prefabs, and I'm just going to click and drag the 2D character. All right, our 2D character guy, which I am going to place him at -6. Let's see here, -1.5 and 0. And actually, I'm going to move my ground over a little bit. So I was wrong with those numbers anyway, because there we go. And we can see our guy there. And if I run my scene right now, my guy just stands there, and I can move him back and forth, and I can jump. That's all built into the 2D character controller. If you want to know how that's built, actually, go ahead and watch my video on the 2D character controller. I've actually covered it previously. So we have all that, and we need to make some changes to our player. Like I said, this is an infinite runner, and I'm kind of fashioning this after something like maybe Jetpack Joyride or Robot Unicorn or any of those games where your character just starts running and the character is just always running, and basically you just jump. Okay. A question in chat here, will I be covering how we're using Mechanim? I actually already covered Mechanim in my 2D controller video, so go check that out. I'm not going to cover that material again, just because there's just no sense in covering it again. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to modify this character to just constantly be running. I also want to add a double jump, right? Because one jump is I mean, it's sufficient, right? But I want double jumping to give me a higher level of control in my game. All right. And so with my 2D character selected, sorry, I'm just checking my notes here. The first thing I want to do is I want to make the box collider slippery. Now, not the circle collider up here, but the box collider down here. And the reason is if I hit a block on the side of the character, I want him to slide off of it, right? And so we need the slippery material there. And so again, I'm going to go to physics material, grab slippery, and put it right there. So the character's midsection now will be slippery, and they'll slide right off of blocks. All right, and then the next thing we got to do is we have to sort of modify our scripts. So with the character controller selected, I am going to find the platformer 2D user control, and I'll just click right there so it's highlighted, and I'll double click to open that. And we're just basically going to clip out the functionality that gives the player the ability to control the character. I don't want to rewrite my animations. I don't want to mess with the mechanism tree or anything, like the animator controller or anything like that. I don't have to. I mean, all that stuff just works. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove these components. So with the script open in fixed update, I'm just going to remove the ability to crouch and the ability to move left and right. I'm going to set crouch to just always be false. Oh, let me make this bigger too. Sorry about that. So I'm going to make it, there we go. I hate it when it does that. There we go. All right, so basically I'm just going to make sure that the jump, or not jump, what did I do? Whoops. I forgot it was right there as crouch. So it was created locally, so that's my mistake. Ignore everything I just did. Sorry about that. So basically what I want to do is I'm getting rid of these two lines of code. All right, I don't want the player to be able to crouch, and I don't want the player to be able to choose left and right and stuff like that. Instead, I'm just going to replace left and right with the fact that they're always moving forward and they're never crouching. It's that simple. So now the player cannot crouch, and the player is just always moving to the right. All right. Please don't spam and chat. I know I don't see it a lot, but just don't do it, because that just is annoying. And people ask like real questions, and I really like to be able to help people, and it makes it harder to do that. So no pictures and whatnot in chat, please. All right, so at this point we've modified the user control component so that the character will always move forward and always jump. All right, and so let's go back to Unity here, and I'll go ahead and run it, and we're going to see that our character just runs right off to the right, and I can jump once, and then that's that. All right, the character's running, and there you go. And so next, what I want to do, real quick, wait, how did you force right movement? I know you turned stuff off. I've enforced right movement by passing in a 1 right here, meaning that I'm faking the fact that I'm hitting the right key, making him run to the right. So, like I said, this is just sort of a hacky way to do it, but it certainly works. So now I'm back here, and then the very next thing I want to modify is the platform script, which if I click here, it highlights it. And this is where I'm going to build my double jump feature. All right, because I want my character to be able to jump twice. All right, I want a good double jump so I'm able to, you know, have better control in the game. All right, you're going to find that it's actually kind of a difficult game, or at least maybe it's not difficult. Maybe I'm just really bad at playing it, but I'm not very good at it. And so what we want to do is we want to make some changes to make things easier. All right. So what I'm going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable to store whether or not I have double jumped already. So I'll say bool double jump. All right, just like that, and say false, meaning we have not used our double jump. All right, that makes it's simple. By the way, for those of you who are asking where these scripts are coming from, I downloaded the sample assets which has a 2D character controller already in it. I clicked and dragged it into my scene, and now I'm modifying it. If you want to know how to make your own 2D character controller, watch my video on making 2D character controllers, and that's it. There you go. And so all of this is all stuff that you've seen, whether you know it or not, if you've watched my videos. If you haven't watched my videos, this is stuff that you not necessarily have seen. So there you go. All right, so now I have my double jump variable. So in fixed update, I basically what I want to do is I want to say at the end of it here, if the player is currently grounded, so the player's on the ground, we're going to reset the double jump. We're basically going to give it back to them, all right, in case they've used it. If you use your double jump, it turns true and you can't double jump again. So every time you're on the ground, we're resetting it so we can use our double jump again, right? All right, and so then what I'm going to do is I am going to, in the update section, a couple things I'm going to do, all right? And I'm going to come down here to where it says if grounded and jump. And I'm going to modify this a little bit. So what I want to say is if grounded or not double jump. What this basically means is if I'm on the ground or I'm not on the ground, but I have not used my double jump yet, and I want to double jump again, allow me to double jump again. Okay, so that's what this is basically saying. And so at this point, all I'm going to say is, well, I'm going to allow myself to jump again. But first, what I want to do is I want to cancel out my vertical. I want to normalize or cancel out my my current vertical velocity. If you don't do this, your double jump's going to feel weird. Like if I double jump really fast, I'm going to skyrocket into the air. But if I jump once and on my way down I jump again, I'm not actually going to jump at all. So to fix that weird control, basically what we're going to do is we are going to zero out our velocity so that when we jump, we actually jump again. And it's going to make our game feel a lot better. It's actually more physically correct to not do that. I mean, double jump isn't really physically correct anyway. It's more physically correct to not zero it out, but the game feels better if you do. And in my opinion, that's right. That's the most important part. So to zero it out, we're going to say rigid body 2D dot velocity equals new vector 2. And the vector 2 is going to be comprised of rigid body 2D dot velocity dot x. So we keep our current x velocity, that's obviously what we want, and 0. All right, so we're just zeroing out our y velocity. And then we jump. All right, that's already there, I didn't add that. And then we need to disable double jumping, so we can't just double jump infinitely because that wouldn't be good. So I'm going to say if we're not grounded and we manage to jump, that means we used up our double jump. So double jump equals true. There we go. And now we have a double jump. All right. So there we go. All right. All right. So this is saved. Let's go back to Unity. I'm going to run this, and we're going to see jump, double jump. Right. I know the camera's not following the player or anything, so it's really hard to kind of see. We'll get there. That'll come in a second here. One moment. I need a drink. All right. One of the questions is, can I comment a line out so people can see what happens if you don't do that? You can do it on your own. Follow along and do this, and then you comment it out and see what stuff does. But I need to keep going quickly because we're already 27 minutes into this. So yeah, okay. So at this point, our character is set, our prefabs are made. We're actually, I mean, we're pretty far along. So now what we want to do is we want to rig the camera and get some management features in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the main camera, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my background color. Idealistically, I would like a scrolling background. I don't have one to give you guys today. Sorry about that, I just don't have one. If you're curious how to make a scrolling background, go on YouTube and search for my name, Mike Geig, and you'll find my channel. And I did a video on how to do a scrolling background with the new Unity 2D tools. I just don't have a background to show you today, so my apologies. So instead of having a scrolling background, I just don't want this generic default light blue. I want it to feel not so generic. So I'm going to do colors 29, 39, 54, and I'm just going to get a slightly darker blue, which I know is kind of boring still, but it's better than the light blue and whatever, it's fast and easy. So yeah, whatever, what are you going to do? And next, what we're going to do is we are going to create a script that we're going to put on the camera that's going to follow the player. Okay, now we don't want to just nest the camera on the player because we don't want the camera to go up when the player jumps, and we don't want the camera to go down when the player falls, unless that's functionality you want. If you want that to happen, by all means, make your game that way, but I didn't, so I'm not going to. So I'm going to right click on Assets, Create Folder, and I'm going to create a Scripts folder, and I'll open that up, and let's see here. I'm going to right click, I'm going to create a C# script, and I'm going to call it Camera Runner Script. I was going to call it Camera Follow Script, but there's one of those in the sample assets and it gives me an error. So we'll call it Camera Runner Script. And it's a real simple script. You're going to see that most of the scripts, all of the scripts really that we're going to make today, are ridiculously, stupidly easy to do. I like to keep them nice and short. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say public transform player. All right, so we know where the player is. And then during update, we are going to say transform.position equals new vector 3. Even though these are 2D tools, position is a vector 3 still. We just don't use the z-axis. New vector 3, and we're going to use player.position.x plus 6. All right, just 6 just happened to work out because the player's at -6 and the camera's at 0, so the camera will stay 6 paces ahead. All right, 0 and -10, because that's where the camera currently is. And that's it. That's our whole camera runner script. We're just setting the position there. I'll come back to Unity. I'll click and drag that onto the camera. 1 second. Now I will click and drag it onto the camera. There we go. And then I will click and drag the 2D character controller onto the player, so now the camera follows the player. So if I run it, we can see the camera goes with me, and there's my double jump. And I can't double jump again. Cool. So at this point, I mean, really, if you want to be super technical about it, we have an infinite runner, okay? It's just not very fun to play because there's only one platform. But if I had a bunch of these, I mean, it would technically run forever, and the camera would follow it. So technically speaking, we can be done. We're not going to be done. I have a lot more to do. But just so you know, I mean, that's kind of the trick in the basics, is we just make the camera follow stuff. All right. So, yeah. So what we're going to do now is we are going to, oh, by the way, so I see there's some chat or talk in the chat about efficiencies and the best ways to go about things. Let me say this real quick. First off, this is a prototype, so we're not super concerned about efficiencies. Basically, I'm writing the stuff as quickly as possible so you can all see it. I'm not promoting that I'm necessarily doing this the best way, and I'm sure there are plenty of ways we can improve performance and whatnot, but this game is simple enough that performance should not be an issue. So just keep in mind, yeah, maybe there's better ways to do things, but it's really not that big of a deal. It's a simple game, and if you want to make it more efficient, go for it. Take all the time in the world to make it more efficient, but we're trying to make this quickly. So yeah, there you go. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to build something called my destroyers. And what destroyers are is they're going to be a block over here behind the player and under the player. The destroyer block behind the player is going to collect any platforms that go by and destroy them, right? So we don't have an infinite number of game objects in our scene, which would be very inefficient. We also want to put a destroyer block below the player so that if the player falls, we know the player died and we can trigger a game over. All right, so that's our 2 destroyer blocks that we're going to be doing. And so what we need to do first is we're going to go ahead and create a quad. So I'm going to create empty, or create other quad. There we go. Little quad guy. Let me move him out of the way. So we've got a little quad, and we are going to attach this quad to our main camera. All right. And so what we're basically going to say is we're going to rename this destroyer as well. Destroyer, because I think that name sounds cool. You can call it a bumper or whatever, but I think destroyer just feels right. All right, and we're going to move it to -20, 0, 10. There we go. So if I zoom out, you can see it right here. -20, 0, 10, with a scale of 1, 20, 1. All right, so it's just basically going to be a sweeper arm sweeping behind and destroying everything. Next, I'm going to get rid of my mesh collider because I want it to be 2D collision, not 3D. So I'll remove my mesh collider. And I'm going to go to Add Component, Physics 2D, Box Collider, which will be a trigger. We want this to be a trigger. We don't want to have physical collisions. And I'll select Add Collision, Physics 2D, Rigid Body 2D. I don't need gravity, but I want the rigid body so my trigger collisions work correctly because my platforms aren't rigid bodies. And so I will set my gravity scale to 0, because obviously we don't want it affected by gravity. That would not be good. So gravity 0, this thing will just float there and follow along, and then everything will be real simple. Okay, so that is our destroyer so far. And so what we need now is we need what's called the destroyer script, which again I just love because it sounds awesome. So we'll create C# script destroyer script. Probably should have chosen a name less threatening, but I don't know, it just feels good. I like it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all this stuff because I don't care about any of this stuff. And I am going to basically just have void on trigger enter 2D. The 2D is important because we're doing 2D triggers, not 3D triggers. And that'll have one parameter of type collider 2D, which we'll just call other. And a couple of things we're going to do first. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to check to see if the player has entered this collider, right? So I'm going to say if other.tag equals player. Now, the reason I can do this is because, I'm using the 2D sample assets, and the tag is already set to player. If you're following along and you've built your own thing, you need to set the main character's tag to player, or else this will not work. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, for now, say debug.break. We'll change this later to actually go to a different scene, a game over scene. But for now, just debug.break. Because I don't have another scene yet. Otherwise, I'm going to say two things. One, I need to destroy the object that I encounter. If the object has a parent, I want to destroy the parent. If the object does not have a parent, I don't want to destroy the parent. So I'm going to say if other.gameObject.transform.parent, so that's a bit long. So that's just basically saying if that exists, if that does not equal null, then I'm going to say destroy other.gameObject.transform.parent.gameObject. I know that's a bit long, but basically I'm saying, hey, find the game object, look at its transform, see what its parent is, and grab that game object. All right? So it's a lot of dots. All right? And next, so I want to say else, so if it doesn't have a parent, all right, I'm just going to destroy other.gameObject. Just like that. There we go. If it has a parent, destroy the parent. If it doesn't, don't. Done. Okay, so that is our destroyer script. All right, so that's all saved. We'll come back to Unity. I will grab my destroy script, and I will put it on this block, my destroyer. So there we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my destroyer. So now we're going to put the one underneath. All right, and so my duplicate destroyer is going to be at 0, -8, and it's going to have a scale of 20 and 1. So there we go. Again, attached to the camera, should already be. Just double check, it has a gravity of 0, it is a trigger, and it has the destroyer script. So far, so good. All right? So if I run this, and I just let myself fall, my game will pause. Okay? My game pauses because we hit our destroyer, and the debug.break was called. I did forget one important piece of information. We get this error down here, right? Because it still attempts to destroy even after we pause our game. So, my mistake. One more thing. After that, I want to say return. So after debug.break, I'm going to say return. That way we don't get that error. That error is not really a problem. I mean, it's just an error. We close our game. It's not a big deal. It clears out. But I like to not have errors, so return in there will fix that. We'll prevent that error from happening. Cool. So now we have the player runs, and we have our cleanup/management, and the camera follows the player. So now let's let this game go a bit further. We need some ground spawning, all right? And so I'm going to come to my prefabs, and I'm going to right click, I'm going to create a new prefab, which I will call ground spawn, just like that. And then in my scene, I'm going to create a component, create other quad. The quad is just going to be the visual representation of where my ground spawns are. Alright, so it's just a quad, that's all fine. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach to it a spawn script. The script that's going to be responsible for spawning whatever. And we're going to see that we're going to use this for both the ground and power-ups. So we're going to write our script kind of generically, so that we don't have to rewrite a new script. We can just reuse the one we have. I don't care about the colliders or any of the stuff on here. All this is going to do is spawn objects, so I'm not concerned with any of this stuff right here. So I'm going to come back to scripts. I'm going to right click, create C# script, and call it spawn script. Again, this is responsible for spawning something, really anything. So I can have, if I want to spawn enemies with it, I can. If I want to spawn ground with it, if I want to spawn power-ups, whatever I want to spawn, it doesn't really matter. So that's the nice thing about it. We're going to write it generically. That error, I can just clear the error out. It's not still there. I just never cleared it because I haven't run the game since I had it. So in the spawn script, basically what we're going to do is the first thing is we're going to have a collection of the objects to spawn. So I'll say public game object array, which we'll call obj. And then I want to know how fast do I spawn them. So I'm going to do public float spawn min. All right, and we'll just set that to some default value, say 1, and public float spawn max. And again, we'll set that to some default value. So we're going to randomly spawn between 1 second and 2 seconds. All right. We don't need update, so we can get rid of update. And we're going to create a function called spawn. So void spawn. And spawn is basically just going to say instantiate. And what are we going to instantiate? Well, we're going to instantiate a random object in this array. So I'm going to say obj, and then in square brackets, I'm going to say random.range. And my random.range will be between 0 and obj.getLength, passing in 0. So basically, what this does is it picks a random object that we give it. So for the first time, I'm going to give it small ground, medium ground, large ground, and this will randomly pick a small ground, medium ground, and large ground to spawn. All right. And then the position that I want to spawn it at is just going to be transform.position. That's transform with a lowercase t dot position, and the rotation is going to be quaternion dot identity, just so it's your basic rotation. All right. So again, instantiate a random object, and what am I missing here? I'm getting a squiggly. Oh, I'm missing a parenthesis. There we go. So a random object at our spawn object's position with a normal rotation, basically no rotation. It's exactly what we want. And then we want to invoke this method again at some random period of time, because remember, we're randomly spawning here. So I'm going to say invoke. And what am I invoking? I'm invoking spawn again. So the function is invoking itself. And when is it going to invoke itself? Random.range. And we'll pass in spawn min and spawn max. There we go. So after some random period of time between the min and max, the whole thing is going to be spawned again. So we'll just keep getting spawns. We'll kick this whole thing off in the start method by saying invoke. Well, actually, we don't even need to do that. We're just going to say spawn. We don't need to invoke anything there. We'll just call our spawn function. There we go. Invoke spawn. I could also do a random.range invoke to create our first platform in a random period of time, but I prefer it this way. All right. I'm just checking through chat real quick to see if there's anything pressing. Why pass in 0 for get length? Because this isn't a multi-dimensional array. I just want the index of the array at the 0th position. That just happens to be how it's done. I don't know why we don't have a counter.size or length or anything like that. In Unity, with this C# with arrays, we have to do object.getLength and pass in a 0. I don't know why. It just is what it is. All right. So that answers all the people asking about that, which seems to be most of the questions. So cool. So I will come back to Unity, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag my spawn script onto my quad here. So we have our spawn script, and then for objects obj, I'm going to come to my prefabs, and I'm going to click and drag small ground, and I can expand that there, medium ground, and large ground. There we go. And then I'll take my quad and drag it down onto my ground spawn prefab, and then I can delete it. So I have my prefab down here, and we can see it's got the 3 items that it can spawn. Everything is well and good. Now, I want 3 tiers, all right? I want a bottom level, a mid level, which is kind of like where the player is starting, and a top level, all right? And so what I want to do is I'm going to need 3 ground spawns to do that. One for my medium, one for my lower, and one for my higher, all right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag one out here, which I will nest under my main camera. Again, everything nests under the camera, which follows the player, so everything moves along with the player. And this one is going to go at 10, -1.7, and 10. All right, so that's my middle tier. And then I'll duplicate that. And this one is going to go at 18, -4.1, and 10. This is my lower tier. Since it's my lower tier, to make the game a little easier, I don't want any small ground spawning down there. All right, so with this one specifically, I'm just going to change my size to 2, and I'm just going to click and drag large ground there, because I just don't want a small block on my lower level. It just makes the game harder, and so I don't want to do that. And then I'll duplicate my ground spawn again, and this one will also go at 18. It'll go at +1.7, 10. So there we go. So now we have our ground spawn. All right. So let's run our scene and see what we get. So now we can see. I don't know how this is running for you guys because I'm recording the screen, but we get the basics of an infinite runner. Okay. Now, granted, it's not the most challenging thing in the world, and I just died, but we get the idea. So what we have here is now we have actually a running infinite runner, right? I guess to say that another way, our game is running. It's an infinite runner. It's actually, I mean, kind of for a prototype, it's successful and complete, but I mean, it's still kind of boring. So the things I want to add now is I want to add a Hud script so we can see what our score is. I want to add power-ups to increase our score, and then I want to do something when the player dies. I want to go to another scene where I can say, hey, game over, this was your score, do you want to try again? All right. I'm not doing music, sorry. I don't have any music. If I had some, I'd certainly be happy doing that, but I don't have any music. And so if you're curious about audio, I mean, I have a video on how to do audio in Unity, so if you have any questions about that. But yeah, so by the way, some people mentioned the slowness of instantiate. You're absolutely correct. Realistically, I could just instantiate all of these ahead of time, and when they hit this block here, they got moved back to the beginning, or I can build my level ahead of time. There's a ton of things I can do to make this different or faster or whatever. This just happens to be the way I did it. For those of you asking why did quads, you're correct. It is for visual reference, just so I know where they are. Right? If they were empty objects, I wouldn't be able to see them. Since the camera doesn't see these, because my camera view ends here, right? This is acceptable, right? Otherwise, you know, I'd see those things. So that's why I just use quads instead of anything else. So let's get our score now. All right. So now what we want is we're going to create something called a Hud script, which is going to keep track of our score for us. So in my scripts folder, I'm going to create C# script, which I will call Hud script. There we go. HUD stands for Heads Up Display, by the way. And I will just click and drag that onto my main camera, and then I'll open it. And the HUD script is going to be responsible for taking care of the player's score. I could put the score on the character object itself, but I'm just gonna have a HUD script do it. I mean, it's apples and oranges, 6 one way, half dozen the other. I mean, it doesn't really matter. And in my HUD script, basically, I'm going to need a few pieces of functionality. So the first piece of functionality I want is I'm going to get rid of start here, is I'm going to need float player score, which will start at 0, all right, because the player doesn't have any score yet. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add the time to the player score. So the longer they stay alive, the higher score they get. And so I'm going to say player score plus equals time.delta time. So their score will continually go up. And I don't want all these blank spaces. All right. Then what we want is we want a way to increase the score. Because remember, later we're going to have power-ups, and power-ups need to increase our score. So I'm going to say public void increase score, which is just going to read in an integer amount. All right. Now, I'm letting the power-ups tell the HUD how much the power-up is worth. That way we can have different power-ups, and they can just pass in what they're worth to the HUD, right? So that's going to be how we do that. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say player score plus equals amount. Also, if I really wanted to get hackish about it, if I had non-power-ups, I guess power downs, whatever, bad blocks that you hit, I can pass in a negative value here and reduce the player's score. So I don't necessarily need, I could call it change score or whatever, but I don't need a bunch of different functions to do the same thing. All right. And then finally, we're just going to draw the score. So I'm going to say void on GUI, and this is how we manage GUI code with Unity for now until new GUI comes out and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say GUI.label, and I'm going to say new rect, which is new rectangle. I'm basically just determining where this is going to appear. If you've never seen the GUI videos or know anything about GUI, this is going to be new. But there's plenty of resources about it online. I can't even remember if I've done a video on it or not for Unity. Maybe I did. I don't remember. whatever. I don't want to get out of my zone here. And so the rect is just basically going to be where it's positioned. So it's going to be in the upper left-hand corner of the screen at 10 pixels and 10 pixels. If you've ever done any web programming, this will make sense to you as well. Or like Android or iOS native programming, because you have to specify with rectangles. It's going to be 100 wide and 30 tall. And then it's going to say score plus, now this is going to be a little different here. We are measuring this in seconds, or milliseconds actually, and so we don't want the decimal place to appear for a float. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say player score times 100. Furthermore, so this will increase our score so it's not obviously milliseconds, and then I'm going to cast the whole thing to an integer to get rid of that decimal point. So this is what it's going to look like. So GUI label, which will create a label for us at 10 and 10, upper left-hand corner. It's going to be 100 wide, 30 tall, and it's going to say score, and it's going to have the player score multiplied by 100 turned into an integer. And I know that's crazy weird, but that works. One of the questions, how do you offset by percentage instead of pixels? You can do screen.width and screen.height to know how big the screen is, and then you can do half of that or percentage of that or whatever. Yeah, someone else said screen height, and that works there. Whoever just asked about Android programming, you're way off topic, so save that for another day and time, because right now is not the day nor the time. So that's our Hud script, and I'll go ahead and save this, and I'll come back to Unity, and I will click and drag the Hud script over. Oh, I already did that. It's already on the main camera. I did that previously. So let's run it, and we will see our score in the upper left-hand corner right here, and we can see adding up the longer we go. All right. So again, now we have that element. That's all well and good. It's a bit laggy, and I think that's because I'm recording and stuff like that. But anyway, okay, I'm just going to mess up die there. Okay, and so we have that. So there's two more things. I want to do. The first thing I want to do is I want to have power-ups, which will increase my score and add some more playability to this game. And the second thing I want to do is when I die, I want to go to a game over screen and give myself the ability to replay the game, so you're not always just stopping and re-adding and stuff like that. Oh, Adam Buckner's here. Fantastic. I didn't even see that. Welcome. Yeah, awesome. So great. Someone else can help answer questions and whatnot here. That's awesome. Okay, so now that we're here, oh, apologies. I just need to, 1 second. Sorry about that. There was a blip I needed to fix real quick, and I needed to hide my screen. My mistake. Okay, so let's go about adding our power-ups now. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a prefab right here, which we will call Powerup. There we go. Powerup right there. And so in the sample assets under 2D and then sprites, we have this green block. So in this case, this is going to be our, what do I want to say? This is going to be our Powerup block, our green, brightly neon, whatever block. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to reduce its size to be 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, and I'm going to position it at 0, 0, 0, just so it's all zeroed out there. And we need to do some stuff to make this work. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to add a box collider to it. So I'm going to go to Component, Physics 2D, Box Collider, and we're going to make it a trigger. All right. And then what I want to do is I'm going to create a Powerup script, which we're going to attach to it. So back in scripts, create C# script, Powerup script. Now this is the part of the presentation where those of you who are good at efficient code are going to want to like kill me, because what I'm about to do is like super inefficient and you're not supposed to do it. But it's like I said, it's for speed because we're doing this really quick. So I'm sorry, don't hurt me. I promise I'll never do it again. What I want to do is I need a reference to the Hud script so that I can increase the score whenever the player collects the power-up, right? And so what I need to do is I'm going to say Hud script, which I'll call Hud. All right, we'll just store that there. And I will say void on trigger enter 2D, again, because we're dealing with 2D physics here, collider 2D, other. And we're basically going to say if other.tag equals player. So if the player collected the power-up, okay, this is the part that's inefficient. So, sorry. HUD equals GameObject.find. We're going to look for the main camera. And then from that, we're going to do getComponent. And we're going to grab the Hud script from it. Now, it's much better to pull this once, have it on the spawn object, and pass it on to the children, so we don't have to do this, right? Because that just makes things slower. But assuming that, sorry, I'm reading through chat. Yeah, and so we have this here, and so now all I want to do is I want to say HUD.increaseScore, which is the function I created before, and I'm going to pass in 10, and then I'm going to destroy the power-up. If we don't destroy the power-up, the player's going to hit it like a bunch of times, and their score is just going to skyrocket. So this is not super efficient, but this is a prototype. I mean, it doesn't decrease performance on my end, but I have a nice computer, so whatever. Your mileage may vary. I'd highly recommend you fixing this in the future, but again, we're going for speed here. I didn't want things to be too complex. So we're getting the HUD script, we're increasing the player score, and then we're destroying the power-up. So I'll come back here, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to, so here's my prototype green block. I'm going to click and drag my Powerup script onto it, right there. And then I'm going to go to my prefabs, and I'm going to bring that block down to my power-ups, and my power-up is now this block, and I can go ahead and delete it from my scene. So we've got our prefab down here. It's got our trigger, box collider, all zeros there, half scale with our Powerup script. Fantastic. The next thing we need to do is we need a spawner, right? We need something to spawn our power-ups, right? And so again, I'm going to go to Create Prefab, and I'm just going to say Powerup Spawn, just like that. I'll go to Game Object, Create Other Quad. Where are you at? There you are. This one I will also scale down, so it's visibly different from our other ground spawns, right? So just it's smaller in size. And this one is going to get a spawn script, which we've already created. Spawn script, right there. All right, and so we're going to modify this a little bit. So the first things first is the spawn script is going to spawn power-ups. So only one object. We don't need the whole array there. We're only going to spawn one thing. And we're not going to spawn every 1 to 2 seconds. We're going to spawn every 2 to 5 seconds. We want our power-ups to spawn a little bit slower, all right? And then I can take this quad and drop it down to my prefab right there, and then get rid of the quad. Delete. Cool. Now, let's go ahead and start placing them. So I'll bring my power-up spawner back in, and I'll position it under the camera. Again, everything is attached to the camera, which follows the player. And I'm going to position 3 of these, okay? So the first one I'm going to position is I'm going to position this one, at 20. No, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to position it at 20, and I want to position it at -2.6 and at 10, just like that. And this one is going to be the bottom row power-up. Now, the bottom row is the most difficult place to play at, right? Because if you stay on the bottom row, chances are you go to jump, you'll hit your head on a block above you, and you'll fall into a pit, okay? So, to reward players for playing on the bottom row, this is a little bit of design here. We want to encourage people to play dangerously. We are going to reduce the spawn time of these power-ups to 1 and 2.5. They spawn faster on the bottom row. So it's going to encourage you to go down there, but it's also super dangerous in the bottom row. And then I'm going to grab another Powerup script, or Powerup spawner, put it under the main camera. This one is going to go at 23, 0, 10. There we go. And then I'll duplicate that and put this one at 22, 3.4, and 10. So they kind of look like this. Bottom, medium, tall. Okay. Again, if you're wondering where I'm getting these numbers, it's because I made this before, and that's where I got them from. I'm also going to take this moment to save my scene, which I have not done yet. And if Unity crashed right now, we would have lost everything, and that would suck. Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead and run, and we can see we now have power-ups, and I can collect said power-ups and then die because I'm not very good at this game. Let's try that again. And we'll see the power-ups increase our score. There we go. And they're going to increase. Ah, man. See, again, not very good at this game. Okay, but you get the ideas. One of the questions, doesn't 2.5 make it spawn slower? No, because it's going to spawn at the minimum 1 and the maximum 2.5, where the other ones are spawning at the minimum of 2 and the maximum of 5. So this one can be between 2 and 5 seconds to spawn. The other one's going to be between 1 and 2.5 seconds to spawn. So they're going to spawn much faster. Yeah. By the way, yeah, so array.length, someone just mentioned in chat. I thought it had that too, but I didn't see it when I was making the game, so I used getLength because I didn't see a length, and I'm not sure why. Maybe I was doing something weird, or maybe IntelliSense wasn't working for me, but I just didn't do it. Cool. So at this point, we have the player runs, the player has a score, the ground is programmatically generated randomly, there's power-ups, again randomly, that the player can collect to increase the score. The last thing I want to add, and we're at an hour now, so I'm going to be going a little bit over, so our attendance is going to sort of drop there, so my apologies for everyone who only had the hour to watch. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make, or I'm going to add a second scene, and I'm going to make basically a game over scene. And so what I'm going to do, save my scene again, save scene. I'm going to go to my build settings, and we're going to see a bunch of scenes that came with the sample assets. So I just need to uncheck these. I wish they had like a check all, uncheck all, but they don't. So bloop, 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 bloop. Make some strange noises. Okay, cool. So none of these are checked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Add Current. And I will see the current scene, Scenes, Main Scene. The important thing to know is that it has a number of 0. If it's a number other than 0, if it's like 1, 2, whatever, something here was checked. So make sure everything's unchecked, make sure this has a value of 0. Then we're going to go ahead and close this. We're not using it just yet. Then I'm going to say, actually, you know what? That's not true. I'm going to stay here real quick. I thought I was going to switch over my scenes, but I'm not going to just yet. So what I want to do is I want to modify my scripts here to transition scenes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my destroyer script. And right now it says debug.break. That just pauses our game. So now what I'm going to say is I'm going to say application.loadLevel. And I'm going to pass in a 1. The reason I'm passing in a 1 is the next scene we create is going to be scene 1. Since the scene I'm currently on is scene 0. That's what that 0 meant in the build menu. That 0 meant this was scene number 0. So the very next scene I'm going to make is going to be scene number 1. And I'm going to pass in a 1 here. Now I could say in quotes the name of the scene, but then it has to evaluate that string, so it's faster just to say 1. So application load level 1. So now when the player dies, we're going to load the next scene, which we haven't created yet. So don't try this out just yet, because that scene does not exist. It'll exist here in a second. So this is all of the change we need. No more debug.break, just application.loadLevel. All right. Now what we need to do is we need to get our score over to the next scene, right? Because otherwise it doesn't necessarily need to be there, right? Or it needs to be there. So what I want to do is I'm going to come to my Hud script and I'm going to add a new function. I'm going to say public on disable. So basically when we transition from our current scene to the next scene, right, everything gets disabled. So when our Hud script gets disabled, we are going to put the player score into what's called the player prefs, the player preferences. And I forgot public. No, not public. I don't know why I said public. Void. Void is what I want, not public. And so what I want to say is when this gets disabled, store the score in the player preferences. Now, the player preferences is not necessarily a great place to store this stuff because it's plain text file on your hard drive, which means you can modify it. I don't know why you would want or feel the need to cheat on a game this simple, but you can. A better thing to do is to keep like a packet with a score in it and persist that using don't destroy on load. But that's, again, it's all about making it simple, right? So we want this to be real simple. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say player prefs dot set int. I'm going to set an integer, and the name that I'm choosing is score. I'm just going to pass in some key and some value. So I'm going to pass in score, and I'm going to pass in player score. And I need to pass in the player score as an integer, just like that. So this line, this function actually, will allow me to pass the score through the player preferences to the next scene. Now again, I'm going to reiterate, that's not super secure, but it certainly works. And for simple games, it works just fine. There's no real reason not to. More complex games, you'd want better security. Cool. Now we can go ahead and make our new scene. So again, I'm just going to make sure everything's saved, and then I'm going to click New Scene. Oops, no, wait a minute. There we go. I accidentally went over and hit undo something. So New Scene, we got our blank scene here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, save scene, and go into Scenes, and I will call it Game Over Scene, just like that. And then I'm going to go to Build Settings. I'm going to add my current, so the scene is now 1. Remember when I did application load level and I passed it a 1? That's why we need 1 there. Okay. And then real simple, this scene's going to be nothing major. I wanted to have a nice background image here that was like, game over, you suck. But I didn't have anything, and I didn't have time to make one. So, you know, that. So our game over screen is going to be very basic and whatever. It's going to be kind of boring. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to create a new script, which I will call Game Over Script. And I'll click and drag that onto the camera. There we go. And then I will run this. All right. And so now all I want to do, and again, please try to keep comments to be relevant, because chat's kind of going nuts with other stuff there right now. And so in here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say, get rid of this, get rid of this. I'm going to say int score equals 0. In the start, I'm going to say score equals player prefs dot get int. Remember, I set the int previously, and I'm going to get the score. There we go. And then I'm just going to do on GUI. So void on GUI. This is going to look like a pile of garbage if you don't know what the GUI is, how the GUI system works. Just follow along. I mean, if it doesn't make a lot of sense, then that's fine too. Yeah, I apologize to everyone who has to leave. I'm just about done, but you can catch the rest of it on the archive. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say GUI.label. And the first thing I'm going to say is new rect. And I'm going to pass in screen width divided by 2. So this is in the center of the screen. Minus 40. And then I'm going to position at 50 with a width of 80 and a height of 30. And it's just going to say game over in all caps. Now, you're going to notice that this stuff isn't centered exactly right, just because it's really hard to do without getting into custom GUI styles, and that is definitely not what we're covering today. So the GUI is going to look bad. Just be ready for that. Like I said, it's a prototype. So I'm going to do another label that's going to tell you your score. It's going to be new rect, and that's going to be screen dot width divided by 2 minus 40. And it's going to be at position 300. It is going to have a width of 80 and a height of, say, 30. And it is going to say score plus score. Just like that. There we go. And then finally, we want a retry button. Okay, so I'm going to say if GUI.button, and I'm going to say new rect, and again screen.width divided by 2 minus 30, and then I'm going to position that at 350 with the width of 60 and a height of 30, and it's just going to say retry question mark. And buttons are if statements, so that's in an if. And if they click that button, it's going to say application.loadLevel, and we're going to go back to 0. Okay, so that is my game over script. Basically saying game over, here's your score, do you want to try again? It's going to be very basic, it's not going to look good, just be ready for that. So let's go back to my main scene. Oh, I do want to save that scene. And let's play. So we'll play the game, I'll see how long I can go. Alright, apparently not very long. And so it says, game over. My score is a whopping 13, which means I made it 13 seconds. Would I like to retry? And I will hit retry. One thing I forgot to do as well, I'm going to come back to game over screen, go to my camera, and I want it just to be the same color. It's just nitpicky, since it's kind of ugly anyway. But whatever. Alright, and so now that's it. I mean, that's our infinite runner. And like I said, I'm not wowing you with technical innovation here. I'm just really terrible at this game. But I wanted you to have an opportunity to see how a framework game can work. And yeah, and actually now that I'm realizing it, I'm not doing my score calculations correctly. Because you'll see here my score is 4,200 and here I see 43. So whoops, I got to go back to my script and forgot my score is that times 100. There we go. That's the appropriate score. And actually, that's not even correct. I'm doing this all wrong. When I pass my score in, this is where I did it wrong. Times 100. I want to pass in my score correctly and not pull it out incorrectly. So there we go. That'll fix it. And so now I'll run my scene. And my score should be somewhere around 1300. And I see 1300. Fantastic. Cool. All right. And I actually lost precision there, which means now I'm just kind of going off the top of my head. That's why I lost precision. I should look at my notes. I have notes that tell me how to do all that stuff, but who needs notes, right? So let's see here. Let's get a couple power-ups, and now we should be accurate. And we're accurate. Fantastic. Okay, so that's the game. That is an infinite runner. The character moves, the camera follows it, we clean up our assets as they pass the player. We have ground, low, medium, and high tiers. We have power-ups, again, low, medium, high tiers. We have a score, we have a HUD. When the game ends, we go to a new scene that displays the score to the player and gives us the ability to come back out. All right, so, yeah. Okay, so all of that in an hour and 11 minutes, minus the stuff we talked about at the beginning, is really about an hour, so fantastic. Cool. Now, before we get to questions and all that stuff, again, I'm going to go ahead and promote here. Any questions, concerns, comments, feel free to follow us on Twitter at Unity3D, at Mike Geig, which is me, at Will Goldstone, and at the Ant Ratch, who's actually here. Adam Buckner is the Ant Ratch there, so he's in chat, which is fantastic. I did not know you'd be here today, so great. Should have told me, man, so I could have, like, called you out there. Yeah, so fantastic. So one question, Lazy Sloth, can we get these files? These files are there, the sample assets. Like I said at the beginning, just go to the asset store and grab the sample assets. There they are. Thanks to everyone who actually attended this. We had an awesome turnout, so fantastic. I will stick around for a few minutes if anyone has questions after I stop the screencast there. But for the most part, that's going to wrap things up. And I really appreciate everyone watching, and have a great time this weekend if you participate in the Global Game Jam. I really encourage you to participate in the Global Game Jam. It's fantastic. Use Unity. If you don't want to use Unity, don't, whatever. Just go ahead and participate, because it's just such a good time. But if you decide to use Unity, oh, how crazy would it be if the theme for this year's Global Game Jam was like Infinite Runner, right? Or like Infinite or Runner or something like that. Man, that would just be wacky. We don't really know what the theme is yet, but that would, or like run and collect power-ups that are lime green. That would be pretty cool. So yeah, so cool. Any questions, feel free to hang out. Like I said, I'll hang out a little bit longer. There's a lot of people here, so the chat might be pretty insane, but I'll do my best. Everyone have a fantastic time playing around with this stuff. Have a great weekend if you participate in Global Game Jam, or if you don't. And otherwise, just really thanks everyone for watching. And next tutorial. So some people are saying, when's the next tutorial? Soon. I haven't added any to the schedule yet. I've got some. I just have been lazy, so I need to do that. So here within the next couple days, we'll see some more stuff added to the schedule. So I'm not forgetting about everybody. The next live training is not scheduled. I'm thinking it won't be this upcoming Monday, because that's right after the Global Game Jam, and I will probably be pretty sleepy. So maybe the week after that. But anyway, yeah, so I will get it posted, and I'll mention on Twitter when it is posted so you all can see it. So again, now I'm for real wrapping up. Thank you everyone for participating today and making it fun and having lots of crazy chat. And you all have a pleasant week.